The blood on her lip tasted like copper and shame as Beatrice Turner stumbled through the front door of the boarding house into the howling white fury of the worst blizzard Casa Grande, Arizona had seen in January of 1883. The bruise forming along her cheekbone throbbed with each heartbeat, a cruel reminder of Marcus Henley's fists and the promises he had broken over their 3-month courtship. She had believed him when he said he loved her, believed him when he whispered that she was his whole world. But tonight, when she had refused his advances in the parlor of the boarding house where she worked as a seamstress, his true nature had revealed itself in violence. The wind tore at her thin cotton dress and shawl, neither adequate for the unseasonable storm that had rolled down from the mountains earlier that evening. Beatrice had fled without her coat, without proper shoes, with nothing but the desperate need to put distance between herself and the man who had transformed from suitor to monster in the span of a heartbeat. Behind her, she could hear Marcus shouting her name, his voice carried away by the shrieking wind. The rational part of her mind knew she should seek shelter, should pound on one of the doors along the main street of Casa Grande, but panic drove her forward into the blinding snow. Her feet in their worn house slippers sank into drifts that reached past her ankles, soaking through to her skin within moments. The cold bit through her dress like teeth, and already she could feel her fingers going numb where they clutched her shawl closed against her chest. The wind-driven snow stung her face, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. She had no destination in mind, only the primal urge to escape, to run until her legs gave out, or her lungs burst, or Marcus gave up his pursuit. Beatrice had come to Casa Grande 6 months earlier from Philadelphia after her parents died of typhoid fever, leaving her orphaned at 21 with no inheritance and no prospects. Her mother's cousin had secured her the position at Mrs. Whitmore's boarding house, where she mended clothes and linens for the residents. The work was honest and the pay modest, but it had been enough until Marcus Henley arrived in town, claiming to be a land surveyor from back east. He had been handsome and charming, with smooth words and expensive clothes that made her believe he was a gentleman of means and education. What a fool she had been! What a naive, trusting fool! The buildings of the town fell away behind her as she staggered forward, her sense of direction completely lost in the whiteout conditions. Her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue, adding fresh blood to the taste already in her mouth. Tears froze on her cheeks almost as soon as they fell, and her legs trembled with cold and exhaustion. She knew she was going to die out here in this impossible storm, but somehow that seemed preferable to returning to face Marcus and his fury. How long she walked, she could not say. Time lost all meaning in the white void, where sky and ground became indistinguishable. Her thoughts grew fuzzy and distant, and a strange warmth began to seep through her limbs, a warmth she dimly recognized as dangerous. She had heard stories of people freezing to death, how they felt warm at the end, how they simply lay down in the snow and never rose again. Perhaps that would not be such a terrible fate after all. Her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, and she pitched forward, landing hard on her hands and knees. The impact jarred her teeth together and sent fresh pain shooting through her already battered face. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not obey. They trembled and gave out, dropping her face first into the snowdrift. The cold pressed against her like a living thing, drawing the last remnants of warmth from her body. This was where she would die then, alone in a blizzard, far from the city where she had been born, far from everything she had ever known or loved. At least her parents would never know how their only daughter had met her end. At least they would never know about Marcus and his cruelty. She closed her eyes and let the darkness come. The sound of a horse's whinny pulled her back from the edge of oblivion. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, turning her over, and a man's voice cut through the howl of the wind. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" The voice was deep and rough, with what sounded like genuine concern. She tried to open her eyes, but her lashes were frozen together. Those strong hands brushed snow from her face, surprisingly gentle despite their obvious strength. "We need to get you somewhere warm right now," the voice said. and then she felt herself being lifted, cradled against a chest that radiated heat through layers of wool and leather. "Hold on, miss. Just hold on for me." She wanted to tell him it was no use, that she was already gone, but her lips would not form words. Instead, she let herself sink into the warmth of his body, let herself be carried through the storm by this stranger who had appeared from nowhere like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. The world swirled in and out of focus. She was aware of movement, of the creak of leather and the steady rhythm of a horse's gait, of the wind lessening as they moved into some kind of shelter. Then she was being laid down on something soft, and blankets were being piled on top of her, and those gentle but firm hands were removing her frozen slippers and rubbing feeling back into her feet. "Stay awake if you can," the voice commanded. "I know you want to sleep, but you need to stay awake." She forced her eyes open and found herself staring up into a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a jaw shadowed with several days' worth of dark stubble. The man looked to be in his late 20s with the lean, hard build of someone who made his living through physical labor. He had removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair that curled slightly at the ends where it brushed his collar. "There you are," he said, and the relief in his expression seemed genuine. "What in God's name were you doing out in that storm?" She tried to speak, but her throat would not cooperate. He seemed to understand, reaching for something beside him and then carefully lifting her head to help her sip from a tin cup. The liquid was warm and bitter, some kind of tea or coffee, and it burned all the way down her throat, but also spread warmth through her chest. "Easy now," he said. "Small sips. You have been out in the cold too long." As feeling returned to her extremities, so did the pain. Her feet and hands burned and ached, and her face throbbed where Marcus had struck her. She must have made some sound of distress because the man's expression darkened as he studied her face more closely in the lamplight. "Someone did that to you," he said, and it was not a question. His jaw tightened, and his eyes went hard. "Someone hurt you, and you ran out into the storm to get away from them." Beatrice managed a small nod, and to her horror, tears began to stream down her face. The man's expression softened immediately, and he grabbed a cloth from somewhere, gently dabbing at her cheeks. "You are safe now," he said firmly. "I promise you that. No one is going to hurt you while I am around. Do you understand me?" She nodded again, and something in his steady gaze made her believe him. Only then did she take in her surroundings. They were in what appeared to be a line shack, a small, rough cabin used by cowboys to shelter during storms while watching over cattle on distant ranges. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, and the single room contained a narrow cot where she lay, a table with 2 chairs, some shelves with supplies, and not much else. The man had hung his coat and hat on pegs by the door, revealing a worn work shirt and leather vest that marked him as a working cowboy rather than a gentleman rancher. "My name is Russell Pierce," he said. "I work for the Broken Arrow Ranch, about 5 miles north of Casa Grande. I was checking the line when I found you." "What is your name?" "Beatrice," she managed to whisper. "Beatrice Turner." "Well, Miss Turner, you picked one hell of a night to be out walking." There was no judgment in his tone, only a dry humor that made her lips twitch despite everything. "I am going to need to check your hands and feet for frostbite. Is that all right?" She nodded, too exhausted and grateful to care about propriety. Russell Pierce moved with efficient care, examining her fingers and toes, flexing them gently and watching her reactions. His hands were calloused and scarred from hard work, but his touch was surprisingly careful. "I think you got lucky," he said after a few minutes. "Everything seems to have feeling in it, and I do not see any of the blackening that means serious frostbite. You are going to be sore and uncomfortable for a few days, but I think you will keep all your digits." He pulled the blankets back up over her feet and tucked them in. "Now, about that face. Do you want to tell me who did that to you?" Beatrice hesitated. She barely knew this man. had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had saved her life. But something in his steady gray eyes made her want to talk, to unburden herself of the shame and fear that had been building for weeks. "His name is Marcus Henley," she said quietly. "He arrived in Casa Grande a few months ago and began courting me. I thought he was a gentleman. Tonight I learned otherwise." Russell's expression remained neutral, but she saw his hands curl into fists where they rested on his knees. "Marcus Henley, I have seen him around town, dresses fancy and talks smooth. That is him," Beatrice confirmed bitterly. "It was all a lie, though. He claimed to care for me, but tonight when I refused to let him take liberties, he became angry. He struck me and said terrible things. I ran without thinking, without even grabbing my coat. I just needed to get away from him." "And he let you run out into a blizzard?" Russell's voice had gone very quiet and very cold. "What kind of man does that?" "The kind who only pretended to be a man," Beatrice said. The tea and the warmth of the fire were helping her find her voice again. "I was a fool to believe him." "No," Russell said sharply. "You were not a fool. He was a liar and a coward. There is a difference." He stood and moved to the fire, using a poker to adjust the logs. "You are welcome to stay here as long as the storm lasts. It should blow itself out by morning, and then I will take you back to town. Somewhere safe, not to that boarding house if he knows where you stay." The thought of going back to Mrs. Whitmore's establishment made Beatrice's stomach clench with anxiety. Marcus knew exactly where she lived and worked. He would come looking for her, would demand an explanation, might even try to finish what he had started. "I have nowhere else to go," she said quietly. "No family, no friends in town beyond casual acquaintances. I only came to Casa Grande because my mother's cousin arranged the position." Russell turned from the fire to study her, his expression thoughtful. "You have any skills beyond sewing?" "I can cook and keep house," Beatrice said. "I am reasonably educated, can read and write and do figures. Before they died, my parents ran a small bookshop in Philadelphia." "Philadelphia," Russell repeated. "Long way from there to Arizona territory." "The longest journey I ever made," Beatrice agreed. "I thought I was starting a new life. Instead, I nearly ended it tonight." "You did not, though," Russell said. "You survived. You ran when you needed to run, and you fought to stay alive in that storm. That takes strength. Miss Turner, do not sell yourself short." His words touched something deep inside her, some part of her that Marcus's cruelty had tried to break. She had survived. She was alive, and Marcus Henley did not get to determine her future or her worth. The storm howled outside the line shack, shaking the walls and rattling the shutters over the single window. Russell retrieved a blanket from a chest in the corner and settled himself in one of the chairs, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. "You take the bed," he said when Beatrice started to protest. "I have spent plenty of nights sleeping in a chair or on the ground. You need the rest more than I do right now." "Thank you," Beatrice said softly. "For everything. You saved my life tonight, Mr. Pierce." "Russell," he corrected. "And you are welcome. No decent man would have done any different." But Beatrice knew that was not true. Plenty of men would have ridden past, either not seeing her in the storm or not wanting to involve themselves in someone else's trouble. Plenty of men would have taken advantage of her vulnerability, demanded payment for their assistance in ways that made her shudder to think about. Russell Pierce had done none of those things. He had shown her only kindness and respect, and that made him a rarer breed than he seemed to realize. She drifted off watching the fire, secure in the warmth of the blankets and the unexpected safety of Russell Pierce's protection. When Beatrice woke, watery sunlight was filtering through the gaps in the shutters, and the howling wind had fallen silent. Her body ached in 100 different places, and her face felt stiff and swollen, but she was alive and warm and safe. She pushed herself up on the cot and found Russell already awake, heating coffee over the fire. "Morning," he said without turning around. "How are you feeling?" Like I tried to fight a bear and lost, Beatrice admitted, which earned her a quick flash of a smile from Russell. That is about what I expected you to say. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and brought one to her. Storm passed in the early hours. Sun is out now, and the snow is already starting to melt. Arizona does not hold on to winter weather for long. Beatrice accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. In the daylight, she could see Russell more clearly. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, with strong features and those remarkable gray eyes. There was a quiet competence about him, a sense that he was someone who knew exactly what he was capable of and did not feel the need to prove it to anyone. What happens now? She asked. Russell settled into the chair across from the cot, his own coffee cup cradled in his hands. Well, I need to finish checking the cattle and make sure none of them got into trouble during the storm. After that, I can take you back to Casa Grande. The question is where exactly I should take you. Do you have any idea what you want to do about Marcus Henley? Beatrice had been thinking about that very question as she woke. The idea of confronting Marcus made her feel sick with fear, but the idea of running away and letting him get away with what he had done made her angry. I want to retrieve my things from the boarding house, she said slowly. I do not have much, but what I do have is mine. Beyond that, I honestly do not know. I cannot stay in Casa Grande if Marcus is there. I cannot look over my shoulder every day wondering if he will come for me. Understandable, Russell said. He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee as if the dark liquid held answers. I have a thought, but you might not like it. Tell me anyway, Beatrice said. The Broken Arrow Ranch where I work is owned by a man named Thomas Grady. He is a good man, fair and honest. His wife, Mary, passed away 2 years ago, and since then the house has been neglected. He has 2 young daughters, 8 and 10 years old, who need a woman's influence. He has been talking about hiring a housekeeper, but has not found anyone suitable yet. Russell looked up and met her eyes. I could talk to him about you. The job would include room and board, and you would be away from town, away from Marcus Henley. It is not much, but it would be safe. The offer was so unexpected and so generous that Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes again. You barely know me, she said. Why would you go out of your way to help me like this? Russell shrugged, but there was something almost uncomfortable in the gesture, as if he was not used to being questioned about acts of kindness. Like I said last night, no decent man would do any different. Besides, I have a sister back in Texas. If she were ever in trouble like you are, I would hope some stranger would step up to help her. I would not want to impose, Beatrice began, but Russell cut her off. You would not be imposing. You would be filling a genuine need. Those little girls need someone to look after them properly, and Thomas needs help running that big house. If you can do the work, it would be a fair exchange. He paused, then added, and I would sleep better at night knowing Marcus Henley could not get to you. The sincerity in his voice made Beatrice's heart skip. She barely knew this man, and yet he seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare in a way that Marcus never had, not even at the beginning when he had been playing the role of devoted suitor. Then yes, Beatrice said. I would be grateful for the introduction to Mr. Grady. Russell nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Good. That is settled then. Drink your coffee and I will rustle up some breakfast. We have a long day ahead of us. True to his word, Russell prepared a simple but filling breakfast of bacon, beans, and hardtack, softened in the bacon grease. It was not elegant food, but Beatrice was hungry enough that it tasted like a feast. As they ate, Russell told her about the Broken Arrow Ranch, painting a picture of a sprawling cattle operation that employed a dozen cowboys and covered thousands of acres of desert and grassland. Thomas built it from nothing, Russell said with obvious respect. Came out here 15 years ago with nothing but determination and a good horse. Now he runs one of the most successful ranches in the territory. He is tough but fair, and he treats his men well. You could do a lot worse for an employer. What about you? Beatrice asked. How did you end up working for him? I was drifting, Russell admitted. Had some trouble back in Texas. Nothing criminal, but enough that I needed a fresh start. Rode into Casa Grande 5 years ago with no money and no prospects. Thomas took a chance on me, gave me a job when I had no references and no experience with cattle. I have been with the Broken Arrow ever since. There was a story behind his words, Beatrice could tell, some pain or loss that had driven him from his home state. But she did not press. They all had their secrets and their sorrows, and Russell Pierce had earned the right to keep his own. After breakfast, Russell saddled his horse, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition. He helped Beatrice onto the horse's back, then swung up behind her. The contact was necessary given that they only had one horse, but Beatrice still felt heat rise to her cheeks as Russell's arms came around her to hold the reins. "Just relax," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "Duke here is steady as they come. We will take it nice and slow." The ride to the ranch took just over an hour, following a track that was barely visible beneath the melting snow. Beatrice had never been much of a horsewoman, but with Russell's solid presence at her back and his arms forming a protective cage around her, she felt surprisingly safe. The Arizona landscape spread out around them, stark and beautiful in the morning light. The storm had left everything draped in white, transforming the familiar desert into something almost magical. They passed several groups of cattle, hardy animals with long horns who barely glanced up as Duke picked his way past them. Russell pointed out various landmarks and features of the land, his voice a quiet rumble that Beatrice found oddly soothing. He clearly loved this place, loved the work he did, and the life he had built here. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low rise, a sprawling adobe structure with a red tile roof and a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Outbuildings and corrals spread out behind the main house, and smoke rose from several chimneys. A few cowboys were moving about, tending to horses and equipment, and they called out greetings to Russell as he rode past. Thomas Grady emerged from the house as they approached, a tall man in his early 40s with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He took in the sight of Russell with a woman in his arms and raised his eyebrows, but said nothing until Russell had dismounted and helped Beatrice down. "Russell," Thomas said by way of greeting. His voice was deep and cultured, with an accent that suggested education back east. "I expected you back last night. I assume the storm caught you out?" "It did, sir," Russell confirmed. "Found Miss Turner here nearly frozen to death about a mile from the line shack. She had some trouble in town and needed help." Thomas turned his attention to Beatrice, his eyes taking in her bruised face and borrowed shawl with a single quick glance. "Trouble indeed," he said quietly. "Miss Turner, you are welcome here. Come inside and let us get you warmed up properly." "Actually, sir, I was hoping to speak with you about a business matter," Russell interjected. "If you have a moment." Thomas looked between Russell and Beatrice, his expression thoughtful, then nodded. "Of course. Miss Turner, please go inside. My daughters Emma and Sarah are in the kitchen with our cook, Mrs. Chin. She will take good care of you while Russell and I talk." Beatrice wanted to protest, to insist that she be present for any conversation about her future, but the weight of exhaustion and pain was catching up with her. She nodded and made her way up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior of the house was spacious but clearly neglected, as Russell had indicated. Dust lay thick on the furniture in the front room, and cobwebs draped the corners. But Beatrice could see the bones of a beautiful home beneath the neglect, with handcrafted furniture and colorful rugs that spoke of better days. Voices led her to the kitchen, where she found a small, efficient-looking Chinese woman working at a large stove, while two blonde girls sat at a scrubbed wooden table, doing lessons from worn textbooks. All three looked up as Beatrice entered. "Hello," Beatrice said uncertainly. "Mr. Grady sent me in. I am Beatrice Turner." The older of the two girls, who must have been Emma, immediately stood and dropped a polite curtsy. "It is nice to meet you, Miss Turner. I am Emma Grady, and this is my sister Sarah." Sarah, a smaller version of her sister with the same cornflower blue eyes, also stood and curtsied. You have a bruise on your face, she said with the blunt honesty of childhood. Sarah, Emma hissed, scandalized. It is all right, Beatrice assured them, lowering herself carefully into one of the empty chairs at the table. I do have a bruise. I had an accident last night. Mrs. Chen had approached during this exchange, her dark eyes missing nothing as she studied Beatrice's face. Accident with someone's fist, she said, matter-of-factly, her English carrying only a slight accent. I make poultice. You sit. She bustled away before Beatrice could respond, and Emma and Sarah exchanged wide-eyed glances. Did someone hit you? Sarah asked. Sarah, that is incredibly rude, Emma said, but she was clearly just as curious as her younger sister. Yes, Beatrice said, deciding that honesty was the best policy with these direct young girls. Someone I trusted hurt me, but I got away, and a cowboy named Russell Pierce found me and brought me here. Russell is the best, Sarah declared immediately. He taught me how to whistle. And he is teaching me to rope, Emma added. Father says he is the finest hand on the ranch. He seems very kind, Beatrice agreed. Mrs. Chen returned with a bowl of something that smelled strongly of herbs and ginger. She tisked as she gently applied the mixture to Beatrice's bruised cheek, her touch as careful as Russell's had been. Man who hit you is bad man, she said firmly. You stay here. Mr. Grady is good man. He keep you safe. That is what Russell is talking to him about right now, Beatrice said. He thought Mr. Grady might need a housekeeper. Both girls' faces lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Emma breathed. Father has been saying we need help for months, but he keeps saying he cannot find the right person. You would live here with us? Sarah asked hopefully. We have not had a lady in the house since Mother died. Father tries, but he is very busy with the ranch. The genuine hope and loneliness in their young faces made Beatrice's heart clench. These girls needed a woman's care and attention, that much was obvious. And if she was honest with herself, she needed them too. Needed a purpose and a place where she could feel useful and safe. If your father agrees to hire me, then yes, I would live here, Beatrice confirmed. The girls exchanged delighted glances and immediately began pelting her with questions. How old was she? Where was she from? Could she read? Did she know any good stories? Could she teach them to sew? Their enthusiasm was infectious, and Beatrice found herself relaxing for the first time since the previous evening. She was in the middle of telling them about her parents' bookshop in Philadelphia when Russell and Thomas entered the kitchen. Both men wore serious expressions, but as Beatrice looked up anxiously, Thomas smiled. Miss Turner, he said formally, I would like to offer you a position as housekeeper and governess for my daughters. The position includes room, board, and a salary of $20 per month. You would be responsible for managing the household, overseeing the cooking with Mrs. Chen's help, and providing lessons and supervision for Emma and Sarah. Does this arrangement interest you? $20 a month was more than Beatrice had made at the boarding house, and the security of room and board meant she could actually save money instead of living hand to mouth. It interests me very much, Mr. Grady, she said. But I must be honest with you. The man who hurt me, Marcus Henley, may come looking for me. I do not want to bring trouble to your home. Russell explained the situation, Thomas said, his expression hardening. Marcus Henley is a coward and a bully. If he is foolish enough to come to my ranch making trouble, he will find himself dealing with me and my men. You have nothing to fear on that score. The quiet certainty in his voice reminded Beatrice of Russell, that same sense of competence and protection. These were men who knew their own strength and used it to protect rather than harm. The contrast with Marcus could not have been more stark. Then I accept your offer gratefully, Beatrice said. Wonderful, Thomas said, and his smile transformed his stern face into something warm and almost boyish. Emma and Sarah cheered, and even Mrs. Chen looked pleased. Russell will take you into town later today to collect your belongings. I am sending him with 2 other men as well, just in case Mr. Henley proves difficult. Thank you, Beatrice said quietly. All of you. I do not know what I would have done if Russell had not found me last night. You would have survived, Russell said, speaking for the first time since entering the kitchen. You are stronger than you think, Miss Turner. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and Beatrice felt something shift in her chest, some new and fragile thing taking root. This man who had saved her life, who had taken her troubles onto his own shoulders without hesitation, was unlike anyone she had ever met. There was no artifice in Russell Pierce, no performance or pretense. He was exactly what he appeared to be, and that was rarer than gold. The trip into Casa Grande later that afternoon proved uneventful, though Beatrice's heart hammered with anxiety the entire way. Russell drove a small wagon, while two other cowboys, Jake and Daniel, rode alongside as escort. All three men wore their sidearms openly, and their expressions made it clear they would not tolerate any trouble. Mrs. Whitmore was shocked to see Beatrice arrive with three armed cowboys, but she listened quietly as Beatrice explained that she was leaving to take a position at the Broken Arrow Ranch. The older woman's eyes lingered on Beatrice's bruised face, and understanding dawned in her expression. Marcus Henley came looking for you this morning, Mrs. Whitmore said quietly. I told him I had not seen you since yesterday evening. He seemed very angry. He is the reason for this, Beatrice said, gesturing to her face. He is the reason I am leaving. Mrs. Whitmore nodded slowly. I am sorry, child. I thought he was a gentleman, or I never would have permitted him to court you under my roof. Go collect your things. I will not say a word about where you have gone. Beatrice's belongings fit into a single small trunk and a carpet bag. As she was carrying them down the stairs, she heard a commotion in the front hall. Marcus Henley's voice rang out, demanding to know where Beatrice was, insisting that he had a right to speak with her. Russell appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his hand resting casually on his gun. Miss Turner does not want to speak with you, Henley, he said calmly. I suggest you leave now before this becomes unpleasant. Who the hell are you? Marcus demanded. Up close and in daylight, he looked less impressive than Beatrice remembered, his handsome features twisted with anger and entitlement. I am the man telling you to leave, Russell said, his voice dropping into something cold and dangerous. And I am also the man who found Miss Turner nearly frozen to death after you hit her and let her run into a blizzard. So I am not feeling particularly charitable toward you right now. Marcus's face flushed red. She is mine. I have been courting her for months. She has no right to leave without speaking to me. She is not yours, Russell said flatly. She is not anyone's but her own, and after what you did to her, you are lucky I do not put you in the ground right here. Now get out. For a moment, Marcus looked as if he might do something stupid. His hand twitched toward his own gun, a fancy nickel-plated thing that looked more like a gentleman's accessory than a working weapon. Jake and Daniel had moved to flank Russell, and the three cowboys formed an intimidating barrier between Marcus and Beatrice. This is not over, Marcus snarled, but he was already backing toward the door. I will not forget this. See that you do forget it, Russell said, because if I see you anywhere near Miss Turner again, anywhere at all, we are going to have a much more serious conversation. Do you understand me? Marcus fled, slamming the door behind him. The tension in the hallway drained away, and Russell turned to look up at Beatrice on the stairs. You all right? He asked. Beatrice nodded, though she was trembling slightly. Seeing Marcus again, even with Russell there to protect her, had brought back all the fear and shame of the previous night. But it had also shown her something important. Marcus was nothing but a bully, all bluster and no substance. He had only seemed powerful when she was alone and vulnerable. Faced with real men who would not tolerate his behavior, he had crumbled immediately. Let us get you home, Russell said gently, and the way he said home, as if the Broken Arrow Ranch already belonged to her, made Beatrice's heart swell with gratitude. The weeks that followed were the happiest Beatrice could remember in a long time. The work of managing the Grady household was significant, but satisfying. She threw herself into cleaning and organizing, transforming the neglected rooms back into the beautiful home they were meant to be. Mrs. Chen proved to be an invaluable ally, teaching Beatrice about the peculiarities of cooking in the Arizona climate and sharing recipes that used local ingredients. Emma and Sarah were delightful students, bright and eager to learn. Beatrice taught them literature, mathematics, history, and geography in the mornings, using the small collection of books Thomas had saved from his wife's personal library. In the afternoons, the girls helped her with household tasks, learning skills they would need as they grew older. Thomas Grady was an ideal employer, respectful and appreciative without being overfamiliar. He clearly adored his daughters and was grateful to see them thriving under Beatrice's care. In the evenings, he would sometimes join them in the parlor, which Beatrice had restored to gleaming order, and read aloud from the newspaper or discuss ranch business. Beatrice found herself included in these family moments, treated less like a servant and more like a valued member of the household. But it was Russell Pierce who occupied her thoughts most often. He came to the house regularly, usually in the evenings after the day's work was done. Sometimes he came to report to Thomas about ranch matters, but increasingly he came just to visit, to sit on the porch and talk with Beatrice while Emma and Sarah played nearby. Russell told her about his life growing up in Texas, the youngest son of a farmer who had lost everything to drought and debt. He told her about his time drifting through the West, working odd jobs and learning the cowboy trade. He told her about the trouble that had driven him from Texas, a fight with a cruel ranch foreman who had been beating horses. Russell had intervened, and the fight had gotten out of hand, leaving the foreman badly injured and Russell facing possible criminal charges from the foreman's wealthy father. "I did not have money for a lawyer," Russell explained one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and gold, and the foreman's family had connections. Thomas gave me a place to hide until things cooled down, and by the time it would have been safe to go back, I did not want to leave. This place feels like home in a way Texas never did. "I understand that," Beatrice said. "Philadelphia was where I grew up, but it never felt like home, not really. It was just the place where things happened to me. Here, though, I feel like I am building something of my own." Russell turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. "You are building a life," he said. "You are giving those girls something precious, and you are making Thomas's life easier. That is important work, Beatrice. Do not ever think otherwise." The use of her first name, which had become natural between them over the past weeks, still sent a little thrill through her. "I could not have done any of it without you," she said honestly. "You saved me, Russell, not just from the blizzard, but from giving up entirely." "You saved yourself," Russell countered. "You ran when you needed to run. You survived. All I did was point you in the right direction afterward." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Beatrice was acutely aware of Russell's presence beside her, of the warmth of his body, and the steady rhythm of his breathing. She had not thought about romance or courtship since leaving Casa Grande, had not imagined that she would ever want to trust a man again after Marcus's betrayal. But what she felt for Russell was nothing like what she had felt for Marcus. With Marcus, there had always been a sense of performance, of playing a role in a romance that did not quite feel real. With Russell, everything was simple and honest. He never said things he did not mean, never made promises he could not keep. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. Spring arrived in the Arizona desert, transforming the barren landscape into something alive with color and possibility. Wildflowers bloomed in unexpected places, painting the ground in purples and yellows and reds. The cattle grew fat on the new grass, and the work of the ranch shifted to branding calves and preparing for the drive to market. Russell was busier during these weeks, often gone from dawn until well past dark, but he still made time to visit, still found moments to sit with Beatrice and talk about everything and nothing. One evening in late April, he arrived at the house with something bundled in his coat. Emma and Sarah were already in bed, and Thomas had retired to his study to work on accounts. I have something for you, Russell said, his expression almost shy. He opened his coat to reveal a tiny bundle of orange fur, a kitten no bigger than Beatrice's hand. Found her by the barn this morning. Mother must have been killed by a coyote or something. She needs someone to take care of her. Beatrice took the kitten gently, cradling the tiny creature against her chest. The kitten mewed pitifully and began kneading her dress with minuscule claws. She is beautiful, Beatrice breathed. Are you sure you want to give her to me? I thought you might like the company, Russell said. The girls will enjoy her too. Thank you, Beatrice said, and impulsively reached out to squeeze Russell's hand. He went very still, his eyes locked on hers, and for a moment she thought he might pull away. Instead, his fingers curled around hers, warm and calloused and strong. Beatrice, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. Her heart began to pound. What is it? I have been thinking about this for weeks now, trying to figure out the right way to say it. He took a deep breath. I care about you, not just as someone I helped or as a friend, but as a woman I could see myself building a life with. I know it is too soon. I know you are still recovering from what happened with Henley, but I needed you to know. I needed you to understand that my intentions toward you are completely honorable. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, but these were tears of joy rather than sorrow. Russell, she said softly, I care about you too. You are the finest man I have ever known. You are honest and kind and brave, and I trust you more than I have ever trusted anyone. But, Russell prompted, clearly reading some hesitation in her voice. But I am frightened, Beatrice admitted. I thought I knew Marcus. I thought I could trust him. I was so wrong, and the consequences nearly killed me. How can I be sure I am not making the same mistake again? You cannot be sure, Russell said. Love always requires a leap of faith, a willingness to risk being hurt, but I can promise you this. I will never deliberately hurt you. I will never raise my hand to you or speak cruel words or try to control you. I will respect your choices and your independence, and if you ever want me to leave you alone, all you have to do is say the word, and I will step back, no questions asked. The sincerity in his voice, the absolute conviction, made Beatrice's remaining doubts crumble. I do not want you to leave me alone, she said. I want to see where this could go between us. I want to take that leap of faith with you. Russell's answering smile transformed his face, and he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was courtly and old-fashioned, and it made Beatrice's breath catch. Then we will take it slow, he said. We will do this right. I am not going anywhere, Beatrice. I am here for as long as you want me. Thomas Grady proved remarkably perceptive about the developing relationship between his housekeeper and his best cowboy. One morning in early May, he called Beatrice into his study and gestured for her to sit. Russell Pierce is a good man, Thomas said without preamble. One of the best men I have ever known. He is honest, hardworking, and loyal. I trust him completely. I know, Beatrice said cautiously, unsure where this conversation was headed. I also know that he is courting you, Thomas continued. And I want you to know that you have my full support. Russell has been alone too long, and you deserve someone who will treat you with the respect and care you should have received all along. If things progress between you, if he asks for your hand, you need not worry about your position here. This ranch is large enough to employ a married couple, and I would be honored to have you both as part of my household. Beatrice felt her eyes well with tears. Thank you, she managed. That means more than I can say. Emma and Sarah adore you both, Thomas added. They have been dropping hints about weddings and babies for weeks now. I am afraid you have given them romantic notions. Beatrice laughed through her tears. They are wonderful girls. You should be very proud of them. I am, Thomas said softly. And their mother would have been too. You have given them back their laughter and their joy. Beatrice, Mary would have liked you very much. The mention of Thomas's late wife was rare enough that Beatrice knew it was a significant compliment. Thank you for taking a chance on me, she said. You and Russell both. I will never forget that you gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. Over the following months, Russell's courtship of Beatrice unfolded with a sweetness and sincerity that made her fall more deeply in love with him with each passing day. They took walks in the cool evenings, hand in hand, talking about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Russell taught her to ride properly, patient and encouraging, as she learned to handle a gentle mare named Daisy. Beatrice mended Russell's clothes and packed special treats in the lunches he took out on the range. They shared their first kiss on a June evening beneath a sky full of stars. Russell had been telling her about a particularly beautiful canyon he had discovered while checking cattle in the far pastures, and Beatrice had said she would love to see it someday. Russell had gone quiet, then cupped her face in his hands with infinite gentleness. I would like to show you everything, he had said. Every beautiful thing in this territory, every sunset and every hidden place. I want to share my whole life with you, Beatrice. She had reached up to cover his hands with her own. Then show me, she had whispered. I want to see it all with you. He had kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she were something precious that might break. Beatrice had kissed him back with all the love and trust that had been building in her heart since that night in the blizzard when he had saved her life. In September, Russell asked Thomas for permission to marry Beatrice, a formality since Beatrice had no father to approach, but one that Russell insisted on as a matter of respect. Thomas gave his blessing enthusiastically, and that evening Russell proposed properly, kneeling in the parlor of the ranch house with Emma, Sarah, and Thomas, all watching with delighted grins. The ring he offered was simple, a thin gold band with a small garnet stone, and he admitted with endearing embarrassment that it had belonged to his grandmother. It is not much, he said, but it is the only thing of value I own besides my horse and my saddle. I would be honored if you would wear it. It is perfect, Beatrice said through happy tears. And yes, Russell Pierce, I will marry you. The wedding took place in November at the small church in Casa Grande. Beatrice wore a dress that Mrs. Chen helped her sew from beautiful cream-colored fabric that Thomas insisted on purchasing as a wedding gift. Emma and Sarah served as flower girls, scattering petals with solemn concentration. Thomas walked Beatrice down the aisle, his expression proud and paternal. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by the ranch hands and a few townspeople who had become friends over the past months. Beatrice felt a moment of anxiety when she saw some familiar faces from her time at the boarding house, but there was no sign of Marcus Henley. She learned later that he had left Casa Grande in disgrace shortly after their confrontation, his reputation in tatters after word spread about what he had done to her. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Russell kissed her with such tender joy that Beatrice felt her heart might burst with happiness. This was what love was supposed to be, she realized. Not the performance and pretense she had experienced with Marcus, but this simple, honest devotion, this certainty that they were building something real and lasting together. Thomas had given them a week for a honeymoon, and Russell took Beatrice to the canyon he had told her about, the one with the hidden spring and the walls that glowed red in the sunset. They camped beneath the stars, and Russell made love to her with the same gentle care he had shown her from the very beginning. Lying in his arms afterward, Beatrice felt the last of her old fears and wounds finally heal. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. When they returned to the ranch, they moved into a small but comfortable house that Thomas had built for his foreman before the man had retired the previous year. It was about a quarter-mile from the main house, close enough that Beatrice could still fulfill her duties as housekeeper and governess, but far enough to give them privacy. The Cowboys had spent the week while they were gone painting and repairing the house as a wedding gift, and Mrs. Chen had filled it with homemade preserves and baked goods to get them started. Married life suited them both. Beatrice continued to manage the Grady household, and teach Emma and Sarah, while Russell worked the ranch and came home to her each evening. They fell into comfortable routines, small domestic rituals that made their house feel like a home. Russell would kiss her goodbye each morning before riding out, and Beatrice would have dinner waiting when he returned. They would sit on their small porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the desert, talking about their days and their dreams. By spring, Beatrice knew she was pregnant. She told Russell on an April evening, almost exactly a year since he had given her the kitten, which had grown into a fat, lazy cat named Marmalade, who ruled their little house with imperious grace. Russell's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, laughing with pure joy, and spun her around until she was dizzy and giggling. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Russell said. He set her down gently and placed his hand over her still flat belly. "You have given me everything, Beatrice. A home, a purpose, and now a family of our own. I did not even know I wanted these things until I found you in that blizzard." "You saved me," Beatrice said softly. "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Russell corrected. "You gave me a reason to be more than just a drifting cowboy. You made me want to build something lasting." Their son was born in December during a brief cold snap that reminded Beatrice of that terrible night 2 years earlier when she had fled into the storm. But this cold came with joy rather than terror, and when she held her newborn baby for the first time, with Russell beside her, tears streaming down his weathered face, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. They named him James, after Russell's father, and he was a healthy, robust baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Emma and Sarah were utterly besotted with their unofficial nephew, and Thomas proved to be a doting honorary grandfather. Mrs. Chen prepared special soups to help Beatrice recover her strength, and the cowboys took turns bringing small gifts for the baby, awkward and tender in their congratulations. The years that followed were full and happy. Beatrice and Russell had two more children, a daughter they named Rose, and another son they called William. The little house by the main ranch became filled with laughter and love, with the chaos of children and animals and the deep contentment of a marriage built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Emma and Sarah grew into beautiful, capable young women, and Beatrice had the joy of helping them prepare for their own courtships and eventual weddings. Thomas remained a dear friend and employer, and when he passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 63, he left the ranch to Emma and Sarah with the stipulation that Russell be made foreman, a position he held with distinction for the rest of his working life. Beatrice never forgot that terrible night when Marcus Henley had shown his true colors, but the memory lost its power to hurt her. It became simply part of her story, the dark chapter that had led her to the brightest parts of her life. She heard occasionally about Marcus over the years, stories of failed business ventures and mounting debts, and she felt only pity for the man who had been so consumed by his own selfishness that he had destroyed any chance at real happiness. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Russell took Beatrice back to the line shack where he had saved her life. It had been maintained over the years, still serving as shelter for cowboys working the far ranges. They spent the night there, lying together on the narrow cot, and Russell held her close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "All of this? A cowboy's wife is not an easy life." Beatrice turned in his arms to look at him. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and his face bore deeper lines from 2 decades of sun and wind, but his eyes were the same storm gray that had captivated her from the beginning. "Not for one single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Russell Pierce. You gave me safety and love and a family. You gave me a real home." "You gave me the same," Russell said, kissing her forehead. "I was just drifting before you, going through the motions. You made my life mean something." They made love that night in the line shack, slow and tender, celebrating 2 decades of marriage and the life they had built together. And when Beatrice closed her eyes, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the blizzard that had driven her into the storm, for the cowboy who had promised her safety, and for the love that had grown between them like wildflowers in the desert, unexpected and beautiful and enduring. Their children grew and had children of their own. James followed his father into ranching, eventually taking over the foreman position when Russell finally retired. Rose married a schoolteacher and moved to Tucson, but visited often with her growing family. William became a veterinarian, one of the first in the territory, and built a practice that served ranchers throughout the region. Beatrice and Russell grew old together on the land they loved, surrounded by the family they had created. They sat on their porch in the evenings, just as they had done when they were young, watching the sun paint the desert in impossible colors, holding hands and talking, or simply sitting in the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely. Russell passed away peacefully at the age of 76, simply not waking one morning with Beatrice beside him. She held his hand and whispered her love, telling him it was all right to go, that she would be fine because of everything he had taught her about strength and resilience and love. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the territory, a testament to the respect and affection Russell Pierce had earned over his lifetime. Beatrice lived another 5 years after Russell's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren who adored her. She spent her final years telling stories, ensuring that the next generations knew about the cowboy who had saved her in a blizzard, who had promised her safety and delivered so much more. She told them about the love that could grow between two people who chose each other every single day, who built their life on honesty and trust and genuine care. When Beatrice passed away quietly in her sleep at the age of 81, she was buried beside Russell on a hill overlooking the Broken Arrow Ranch. The headstones were simple, but the view was magnificent, encompassing thousands of acres of the land they had loved and worked and protected. And if you visited that hill on the right evening, when the light was just so and the wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers, you could almost feel them there still, the cowboy and the woman he had saved, together forever in the land that had become their home. Their great-grandchildren still told the story, how Russell Pierce had found Beatrice Turner nearly frozen to death in an impossible blizzard, how he had promised her safety and given her so much more. They told it as a love story, which it was, but also as a testament to the idea that the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures, that running into a storm could lead you to exactly where you were meant to be. The Broken Arrow Ranch continued to thrive, passing through generations of the combined Pierce and Grady families. And in the main house, in the parlor that Beatrice had restored so lovingly all those years ago, there hung a framed photograph taken on Beatrice and Russell's 50th wedding anniversary. In it, they sat together on the porch of their little house, their hands intertwined, their faces lined with age, but glowing with unmistakable love and contentment. It served as a reminder to every generation that followed about what real love looked like, about promises kept and lives well lived, and the enduring power of choosing each other every single day through blizzards and sunshine alike.